Hello, everybody. I'm here to share another story with you today, but instead of listening for character traits, we're going to be listening for something different today. It's called a connection, and we're going to be listening for a text to self connection today. All of this means is that as I'm reading, you're going to be thinking about a part of the story that reminds you of either a person that you know or a place that you know, that would be the setting, or an event from your own life. So, the story that I'm going to share with you today is Dream Carver. And at the end of the story, I'll go back through and we'll talk about some things that happened in the story that you might have a connection to. Whatever you can do or dream, you can begin it. Boldness has genius, power, and magic in it. Begin it now. Mateo lived in a small village in Mexico, nestled beneath the ancient Zapotec city of Monte Alban. His family grew blue corn and green alfalfa in the fields outside their casa. Every sunrise, when the rackety rooster crowed, Mateo joined his father to carve little toys, which they sold at village fiestas, and to the tourists who came from all over the world to see the great Zapotec ruins. Like many of the woodcarvers in their village, Mateo and his father carved tiny pigs, cats, dogs, and goats, carvings so small they could fit in the palm of a hand. Mateo's sister and mother, like many of the women in their village, painted the carvings in bright, bold colors. Mateo loved the village fiestas because those were the only times when there were so many delicious things to eat. He feasted on turkey with black mole sauce and drank hot chocolate until his belly ached. He danced to the village band and laughed as his mother and father put their fingers in their ears when pum, 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 the fireworks and bottle rockets exploded one after the other in the Zocalo, the village square. In the days between the fiestas, Mateo learned as much as he could about all the animals he saw around his village. He watched how his herd of goats stretched their necks to drink water, and how jackrabbits darted this way and that across the fields. He saw how cats rolled in the dusty grass, and how dogs lay down to rest lazily in the shade. Whenever Mateo sat under his favorite tree, a parade of these animals pranced through his imagination. The goats were as pink as a cactus with green speckles. The jackrabbits were cloaked in orange capes with red and white flames, and the cats were as purple as eggplants with spots of corn yellow. Someday, Mateo promised himself, I will carve all these animals to life. One morning, Mateo told his father about his dreams. Papa, he said, I see animals so big and so bright that I will need to carve them with a machete. I want to make them my way instead of making the same toys we carve over and over. Mateo's father said, Why should you carve differently when for hundreds of years it has worked for us to carve the way I taught you? We work in the fields all day and barely have enough time to make toys for the fiestas and for Senora Martinez to sell in her shop. So stop these foolish dreams. We have work to do. But Mateo couldn't stop the animals from creeping and crawling through his dreams. They visited him everywhere, in the fields during the day and in his dreams as he fell asleep at night. One night, a dazzling golden rose-colored jaguar called out to Mateo, Carve me grand and wild, and you will find the power and strength you need to carve all your dreams. So the next morning, Matteo joined his father and carved miniature toys as he had always done. But in the afternoon, he snuck away and cut a giant branch of fresh green wood from a tree and peeled it with his machete. With a few bold moves, he tried to carve the mighty jaguar that had been in his dreams the night before, but it looked clumsy. Next, he tried to carve an armadillo, but it looked lifeless. Then he tried to carve a chicken, but it looked crooked. "Why don't you come out the way I want you to?" he cried as he threw his half-carved animals to the ground. But Matteo kept carving, day after day and week after week, until finally, one day, as he carved the quetzal, the iridescent bird of the rainforest, the wood peeled off like feathers. Matteo sanded the bird smooth and then took out his paintbrush. He painted the bird turquoise and orange with yellow dots sprinkled across her breast. He painted her long feathers in bright green and black stripes. Matteo could hardly believe his eyes. At last he had carved an animal from his dreams to life. Now the carving came easier. When Matteo imagined a white polka dot squirrel, or an orange-striped gazelle gazing at the stars, or a black and yellow spotted frog bracing to spring, he could carve them all just like that. But what Matteo loved best of all was when he had no idea what to carve. He would sit and look at his woodpile until he sensed an animal waiting there for him. Then Matteo would start to carve, and carve, and carve some more, until he said, "Hola, conejito," and a little rabbit would pop right out of the wood as if waking from a deep sleep. One day, Matteo looked at his animals and wondered what his father would think of them. Would he be surprised? Would he be angry? The next fiesta was Dia de los Muertos, Day of the Dead, the perfect chance to display his carvings. Matteo could barely sleep the night before the festival, but in the early dawn, just before the rooster crowed, Matteo finally fell into a light sleep. Very softly he heard a raven call out to him, "You have nothing to fear. Your dream animals are with you." That morning, Matteo gathered his carvings and laid them down the main street for all to see. As the fiesta began, musicians gathered together and people flocked through the Zocalo. When the children saw Matteo's carvings, their eyes lit up. Like honeybees attracted to sticky, sweet fiesta candy, they swarmed to see the animals and began to name them and to play with them as if they were alive. Woodcarvers marveled at the magical creatures. The noisy, chattering crowd surrounded Matteo and bought one carving after another. Finally, when all the bustle and clamor began to calm, Matteo felt a gentle hand on his shoulder. When he turned around, he saw his father's beaming face. "Matteo," his father said, "it's time for you to teach me a new way to carve." "Papa," Matteo said, remembering the early mornings when his father first taught him to carve, "I saved my favorite carving of all for you." And Matteo picked up the quetzal and placed it in his father's hands. And that's the end of the story, but I do want to go back now and look at a few spots where you might be able to make a connection to something from your own life. The first one was near the beginning of the story. It's where Matteo's father was teaching him how to carve. And I thought you might be able to make a connection to a time where maybe your dad or mom or some family member taught you how to do something. And this page was the festival that they went to, and they talked about all the yummy food that they ate and the fireworks. I thought it might remind you of a time when you went to a similar festival, and maybe you could tell me about that as your connection. On this page, Mateo is trying to make the carvings his way, and he's not having much luck. He tries and he tries and he tries, and he gets kind of frustrated and throws his carvings down. I thought you might be able to make a connection to a time where you tried something new and it was really hard, and maybe you even felt like giving up. On this page, it's the night before the festival where Mateo is going to share his carvings with everybody. And he can barely sleep. He's so excited. I thought some of you might have that experience before, where something is going to happen the next day and you're very excited and you can hardly sleep. And one more thing you might be able to connect to is at the end, when Mateo's father is telling him how proud he is of Mateo. And I thought you might be able to connect that to a time where a mom or a dad or a grandparent was really proud of you. Now, those aren't the only things from the story that you could make a connection with, but those were some that I thought you might want to. So you can pick one or more than one, and you can write about them. On your work plan, you'll see a link to the chart that I shared with you, this chart about connections, and then also a link to an example of a connection that I wrote about dream carvers. So I can't wait to see what you write about this week and read through all of those. And I'll see you later. Bye.